Hey, it's Jeff here from Bow River Trout Fitters. Today we're tying the mini dungeon. This is a Kelly Galloup pattern. It's the small version. We're using a Daiichi 2461 hook in size 4. This is the back hook. Back and front hooks are going to be the same. We'll start our thread, wind it to the back where the barb is. We're going to start with the first plume of Marabou for the tail. I usually use the hook. I like the tail to be a little longer than the hook. We're going to tie it in just on one side of the hook, and we'll run the feather up the side, just create a little bit of bulk for the body. We'll come back, and right here I'm going to tie in the ribbing wire. We're using a red, size small wire for the ribbing. We're going to tie it in here, right in the middle. We'll fold it over so that it doesn't pull out on us, and then we'll wind back to where we start adding our materials. The second plume we'll set on top. We're going to make it the same length as the first. We're tying this fly in olive here, but you can tie this fly in black, white, yellow, natural colors. This really, lots of options when you look at this fly. It's really versatile. We'll bring it back again using the feather for bulk in the body. Now we're going to use a dubbing loop. We're using light olive ice dub for the material. We'll set our dubbing loop, and with the dubbing loop I like this because you can really get some good body in your dubbing with the dubbing loop, especially using ice dub. I'm going to form the pack of ice dub, just a small amount, less is more here. I'm going to form that in my hand and then slip that between the two threads. When you tighten this up, this is tyer's choice here, how picky you want the body, how bulky you want it to be as to how tight you wind this. I'm going to, middle of the road here for me. Going to make sure you don't capture any of your tail fibers. And then we'll just wind this forward, being careful not to catch the hook tip. We'll tie that in, careful not to crowd the eye of the hook. Now we're going to tie in a saddle hackle. I'm using a saddle hackle here, just olive. And I'm going to tie this in just on the underside of the hook, trying to keep the feather perpendicular so that when it wraps nice and even and gives us a nice splay of the barbs of the feather. I'm going to put a half hitch in here and put my bobbin in the cradle. I'll cut the tip of the feather off. Right at the start, I like to make a complete revolution and then winding the feather back, being careful not to hook the tip of the hook. Hackle pliers here can help when you make a mistake like that. Hard to hang on to that feather as it gets small. Once the feather's at the back, I'll use the wire, the ribbing wire, to capture that feather, and then I'll wind it forward quite quickly so that I don't trap down as many barbules of the hackle. I'll tie that off and helicopter the wire. Now we're going to add the tail, or the wing, the over wing of the feather of the fly. Same Marabou feather here. I want it to extend back into the tail. I like to go a little more than half, just to make sure that it does a nice meld when it gets wet and blends into the rest of the fly. Once I tie it in, I'm going to retie this. The reason I'm retying this is that it was just crowding the eye a little bit, and we don't want that. It can really limit the amount of movement that the back end of the fly will see. We'll whip finish this off with a little dab of glue, and then we are going to start the front hook. We'll set this hook aside, and we'll get started on the front part of the fly. Again, this hook is going to be a Daiichi 2461, size 4. When we place this in the vise, the first thing we're going to do is obviously start our thread, but we want to place our eyes. Here I'm just using some red dumbbell eyes. Lots of choices for eyes here. Try and pick you want an eye that's the right size for the fly. Here we're using a medium. I don't want to capture this dumbbell eyes. I'm not trying to set these in right now with the thread. I'm going to use the articulation wire to set these eyes. All I want to do is place them in the right spot of the hook. I'm going back quite far from the eye so that for the head of the fly, when I do my deer hair, I can just do one quick spin and I'm done. So these eyes are quite loose right now, but once we do the articulation wire, these things are going to lock down solid. So the articulating wire, I'm going to place it onto the back fly. I'm just going to make them even. I'm going to make sure that they're not twisted, and I'm just going to pull on that to make sure that I kink that wire so that I always know where the middle section is. I'm going to place one red bead. These glass beads, you can buy them at Michael's. I just put one on. I like the look of it. I don't think Galloup's commercial flies use a bead, but I still like the look of the red bead in the middle. I'm just going to do a couple of quick wraps. I'm going to place the wire on top of the hook. I'm going to make sure that the loop is parallel with the hook. And I can adjust this wire now forward or back. I don't want the back hook to really stick up, but I don't want it so far back that it's going to wrap and catch on the front. I'm going to wrap up to the eyes with my thread, and then I'm going to feed the wire through the eye of the hook. And I'm going to wrap the thread right to the very tip of the eye. I'm going to bend those wires back underneath, capture them with the thread, make sure I've got a good clean eye. And then I'm going to bring the wire right up next to the eyes, wrap it over, capture it on the back side of the eyes, and then run the thread back. And I trim this wire off about 2/3 of the way back on the hook. Now I'm going to come back up to the eyes, and I'm just going to go underneath the hook, but over the eye, pulling tight, couple of wraps, pull tight, and that will lock those eyes in. Now we'll come back, and we'll just work on a skirt. What I'm using here is off the saddle hackle. I'm just using a little pinch of the after shaft of the feather. Just all I'm trying to do is cover the connection up a little bit here. I've got some spare Marabou here on the after shaft. So you can use anything you want. You can use a Marabou plume here if you want, but I find you just need a little bit of feather here to cover this up. Now I'm going to tie in the ribbing wire. Again, it's a red wet ribbing wire. This is Tyre's choice for color. We're using size small. We're going to set that in there. And then we're going to use our dubbing tool again, form another dubbing loop. And quick half hitch back into the cradle with the bobbin. Again, I'm going to form the dubbing material in my hand in the shape that I want it, spread the material out nice and even, and I'll give that a wrap. This time I may go a little bit heavier on the bulk just to make the front part of the fly a little bit thicker. I'm just going to wrap that back to the back of the eyes and tie that off. Now I'm going to take and put my hackle feather in, same thing, going to capture that, try and keep it perpendicular to the hook, and tie that in. This time I'm using a feather that's a little webbier. It's just going to give the front of the fly that extra body. Another half hitch back into the cradle, and now we'll wind that hackle feather back right to the back, couple of turns right at the front, make sure it's all fluffed out. Wind it back, careful of the tip of the hook, capture that with the wire. Now I'm going to wind the wire forward, going nice and quick, making sure that the barbules are all splayed out. I'll wrap it around a few times, then tie it off, windmill the wire off. Now I'm going to have a look at things. I'm going to use a thread to build a little bit of a spot to start the rest of the materials in. Here, just preen everything back, make a few nice even wraps, give yourself a nice working area to put the rest of these materials in. We still have another plume of Marabou. We've got some rubber legs to go in here. So we want a nice working area. First thing we're going to do is I'm just going to take two silly legs here, kind of place them in the middle. I'm going to do one wrap over top, cross over, and you'll see like a figure 8 over the silly legs. Make sure they're even. You can adjust them, the thread's not tight yet. And then I'll do a couple of quick wraps and tighten those down. Next thing we're going to do here is tie in our overwing, just another plume of Marabou. I'm going to size this so that it goes back into the rear hook, just maybe halfway to over the rear hook. Set that in here, And I'm going to make sure that I tie this right over top of the eyes so that the next step I'm going to do the collar of the fly in deer hair. And if you go ahead of the eyes with the Marabou, you'll have a nice flat surface so that the deer hair sits on there better. So I've stacked this deer hair, I've trimmed it back to the size I want, sized it as far as how far I want the collar back. I do one wrap. I'm really pinching the sides of the hook here to hold this stack of hair on the top of the hook. Now I'm going to start to wind my thread through, locking in that hair, and I just keep tightening it down. You'll see that it's forming a nice tight head, and now I'll go ahead of the eyes and I'll just give it a pinch, kind of flatten it down. That collar is locked in. I've got another stack of hair here, quite a bit, probably like a pencil and a half. This I'm going to work down, let it move around the hook so that the hook's in the center of this bundle of hair. I've done one wrap through, I've done another wrap through, and then the third wrap I'm going to grab the eyes and the collar and spin that hair in front of the eyes. Now that that hair is spun on there, I'm going to push it back, just try and work that hair back so that I've got a nice clear eye of the hook, and I can work my thread forward to the front of the fly and tie my thread off. Preen the hair back, make sure you can see the eye, give it a push back if you need to. These heads don't need to be packed tight. The looser these heads are with hair, the quicker they fill up with water, the quicker the fly sinks, and the quicker they shed water when you recast them. So here I'm just going to do a few wraps in front of the hair, and then I'm going to do a whip finish, just using my fingers, 3-4 turns on a whip finish, tie that off, and then we can start to trim the head. When we trim the head, I'm just going to use a double-sided razor blade here. Be careful with the razor blade. I don't know, we're all adults here. Nobody needs to be told to be careful. So we'll trim that thread off. First cut we use with the razor blade, we're just going to do on the bottom of the fly, and it's just a flat cut. We don't want to cut into our eyes or anything. We just want a nice flat bottom on the fly. Try not to cut your hackle off, don't cut your legs. But we want to expose the body of the fly so that we have a nice view of that ice stub body. Next I'm going to bend the blade in the shape that it's all trial and error here. And I'm going to start at the front and just push my way up and back to the collar. I want to go right back into the collar. So when you're spinning, when you're prepping the deer hair to be spun as the head, try cutting off the tips. What that'll do is it identifies which hair is for the head and which hair is in the collar. So just using the blade, I'm just trimming back now. I'm preening the hairs out, pulling them out, making sure they're all dressed out the way you want it. And now it's just shaping the head to your preference. I'm going to trim off the hair in front of the eye of the hook, and then I'm just going to shape the sides. I'm going to use the scissors to expose the eyes. If you want a narrower head or a bigger head, this is all tier's choice. I don't know that it really affects how the fly fishes. These flies fish really well, especially when the fish are on that food bite. This is a great fly to fish spring, fall, summer, doesn't matter. This is just a nice size streamer, casts easy, has lots of movement in the water. So keep trimming. Here we're trimming this fly. We're just capturing a few of the hairs that are out of place. We're going to try and expose a little bit more of the belly here. Again, we use 2 size 4s here. You could use a size 4, maybe a size 6 in the back. That's up to you. I find 2 size 4s just fine. It makes it easy to apply the materials. Bigger hook to tie on. Keep trimming, expose those eyes. You know, if you have to pull the fly out of the vise here, that's great. Get things to where you like them. There's no magic shape here or anything else. Now we're going to take and strip the legs back, cut them to length. We cut them just so that they're almost just full length. Run it to the back of the fly, and you're done. You can get all these materials at Bow River Troutfitters, or get us online at bowrivertroutfitters.com. Thanks.